And joining me now with more on the president's agenda and his efforts to unify the country in this moment in time in the Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt. Karoline, thanks so much for being here with us this morning. You heard what the First Lady told me. Does the president talk about that with you? Has he talked about efforts to unify the country?
Absolutely, Maria. He talks about that quite often. And first of all, I want to say congratulations to Mrs. Trump, our beautiful, wonderful, classy First Lady, on the debut of her documentary film. I know that it's a blockbuster movie in theaters now, and it's a really a great example of what the First Lady is truly like behind the scenes. And she has a great influence on the president. And as you heard from her in that clip with you, yes, the president wants to unify the country. And I know the president feels the best way to do that is by bringing people together through prosperity and safety. And if Americans are living in safe communities, if they have more money in their pockets, if Americans are given the real chance to live the American dream, that's ultimately how we are going to unify the country. And that's what the president is working towards every day.
And I heard Tom Homan earlier this week say, look, we're going to focus on the criminals. We're not just getting people out as a priority because they broke the law in the first place to get in here, but we're prioritizing first those people who are committing crime. So, Karoline, talk to us about what you envision here, because we're going to talk with Eric Schmidt, the senator from Missouri, in a few moments. And he put a 4-point plan out on the Senate floor last week on what to do about the debate over the immigration crackdown. Do you expect new restrictions on Border Patrol, Karoline? What can you tell us in terms of the results here as a result of the fact that 2 people are dead, even though the president is trying to weed out criminality in this country, and you've seen this resistance?
Well, the White House and the president are open and willing to listen. I know the president said aboard Air Force One last night that those conversations and discussions will continue. Last week, the White House invited moderate Democrat senators to come to the White House and to discuss their concerns so that we can hear them out and at least see what they are trying to put on the table. Unfortunately, that meeting was blocked by their leadership. So these conversations will continue, Maria, and ultimately the president will be the decider on any policy changes. But what I know in talking with the president and seeing what this administration has done over the course of the last year is that President Trump is never going to waver in the commitment that he made to the nearly 80 million Americans who voted for him to deport illegal alien criminals who broke our nation's laws to get here and then have committed further crimes of violence against American citizens. And that's why ICE and Border Patrol are true patriots. They need to be respected. The Democrats need to agree to stop demonizing them. We've heard despicable rhetoric from people on the left comparing ICE to the Nazi Gestapo, Donald Trump's police force. That is egregious language that has led to the increase in violence, threats, and attacks against ICE agents who are brave men and women who put on the uniform to enforce our nation's immigration laws. So the Trump administration is always going to be on the side of law and order, and we want to remove these illegal alien rapists, murderers, pedophiles, despicable individuals from our country to protect the homeland. And the president has done a phenomenal job at doing that. And that's why murder rates in this country, newly released data show, are at the lowest in recorded history. These things are not coincidental. Under Joe Biden, murders were up, violent crime was up, we had illegal aliens invading our country from all over this world. All of that has ended. So President Trump knows what works. Democrats, if they were smart, would trust him and listen to him.
Yeah, it's just very upsetting to see innocent people lose their lives. But I also recognize that you cannot resist Border Patrol, and you cannot get in their faces and obstruct what they're doing in terms of their operation. So do you expect any changes in that regard?
Well, look, as you said, Maria, the president, nobody in the Trump administration nor the White House wants to see Americans losing their lives. What we want is law and order. What we want is for the brave men and women of law enforcement to be able to do their jobs and carry out lawful immigration enforcement operations without being demonized, spit on, without their vehicles being kicked in by agitators, many of whom are paid. And I know the FBI and Department of Justice are looking into these organized crime rings of these leftist agitators who have been attacking our law enforcement in a very sophisticated manner.
Yeah, it's a very important point that you make there. The president is also getting, some pushback in certain pockets of the Republican Party, right? I mean, look what happened with Thom Tillis. You've got Kevin Warsh, the president, making this announcement that is his choice for the next chairman of the Federal Reserve. And Tillis comes out and says, look, I'm not going to move anybody forward. He's on the Senate Banking Committee. So what are your thoughts in terms of Kevin Warsh's prospects in terms of getting confirmed and becoming the next chairman of the Fed, given Thom Tillis's pushback?
Well, I certainly don't think a United States sitting senator should be holding the entire country and our economy hostage over the fact that he has some political disagreements with an investigation that the Department of Justice is overseeing. And the DOJ is overseeing a probe into Jerome Powell, a legitimate probe. And Jerome Powell is expected to be out of this job in May anyway. So I don't understand Senator Tillis's argument there. President Trump has appointed Kevin Warsh, who is a highly qualified and distinguished economist with a very exceptional resume. And the White House is going to work with the Senate to quickly confirm him, because we need a new chairman of the Fed, not just for timing purposes, but also for our economy. Look, President Trump has brought the core annualized inflation rate down to 1.4%. This is a remarkable turnaround from the record high 9% inflation we saw under the previous administration. And President Trump has done the work. His policies are working, and the interest rates for the American people need to be lowered. Kevin Warsh ultimately will make that decision himself, but it's very unfortunate that Senator Tillis is making such comments.
Karoline, look ahead for us. What are the most important catalysts that we need to be aware of in the week ahead? I know that banks and crypto companies are going to be at the White House tomorrow. Is there anything else you can tell us that we could look forward to on the president's schedule in the week ahead?
Sure. Well, the president's going to have another busy week. As always, you're going to hear from him. Some more drug pricing announcements will be coming this week, as well as some other economic-related news. You saw last week the president was in Iowa. He's gearing up for another domestic trip, not this week, but the following week. And he looks forward to continuing to go across the country, Maria, and talk to everyday Americans about how his economic policies are working for them and their families.
All right. We will be watching every step of the way. Karoline, great to have you this morning. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. You too.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.